Welcome to Workworld Adventures, where we explore the fascinating careers of everyday people. Hey there, I'm Jimmy Man, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about a revolutionary advancement in rotator cuff and other tendon repair using demineralized bone fiber. Dr. Andy Carter isn't just a polymer scientist with over 80 patents. He's one of the most brilliant minds in biomedical engineering whose work could change the future of orthopedic surgery forever. From how he chose his fascinating career path to the incredible journey that's led to his latest breakthrough, for which, by the way, he received the Orthopedic Society of Sports Medicine's Distinguished ACE Award, we're going to be covering it all in today's sit-down. Join me as we go off the cuff, off the rotator cuff, with Dr. Andy Carter. Good to see you again, Andy. How have you been?
I've been busy rushing around, but that's what you do. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I know you've been quite hard to track down. You've been traveling and educating people, which is which is, like you said, it's what you do. Welcome to our audience. We have Mr. Andrew Carter, PhD, with us and listening, and you'll hear some exciting things that he's doing in the world of, should we say, bioengineering or tissue engineering? Is it?
Yeah, it's bioengineering. Tissue engineering is a word that's used as well, but yeah.
All right. So Andy, how did you get into this field? I'm going to talk a little bit more about, the amazing things that you've been doing. Um, what what prompted me? Give us a little bit of your history.
My neighbor where I lived, our neighbor worked in the university, and I went into his lab one day and saw down an electron microscope, saw these polymer crystals, and I thought, wow, that's cool. I want to do that. And on that basis, I decided to go into a career in polymer science. So, yeah, from a good decision making perspective, I mean, it was rubbish because it was just a pure, oh, that looks cool, I want to do that. But I I made that decision. I got into university and I found that, yep, I did really enjoy the subject. So that gave me the motivation to work hard at it. And yeah, I worked hard. I played hard as well. But got through and knew when to stop partying and do the revision for exams and stuff like that. Um, got through, just really fell into doing a PhD after my degree. I think it was somewhat easy because it saved me from having to make any decisions or go out and get a job or something like that. Basically, I had my tutor and a couple of the other professors in the department just came up to me when the exam results came out and said, "Hey, would you like to do a PhD with me?" So, on that basis, I did a PhD. I then went off after my PhD and did a postdoctoral research at a different college. Again, looking at polymers and looking at structure property relationships in polymers, which is sort of my thing. It's if you understand the structure of something, you can understand how it's going to behave when you do things to it, like processing, and so that helps in understanding how to make things. So I started off. I was doing a postdoc. I did that for a couple of years. And then I wasn't looking for a job, but back in England, there's a magazine called New Scientist. It's a little bit like Scientific American, but it's the Brit version of it. And so I was in a babysitting triangle, and I was doing my stint babysitting somebody's kid, and there was a New Scientist, so I was reading it and got to the back where all the job adverts, and sort of looked through and saw this job advert for a polymer physicist, and I sort of read it and read what they want and thought, I could do that. And I applied. I wasn't really looking for a job, and I didn't need a job. I still had plenty of time going on my contract, but yeah, I applied to this company I'd never heard of called Smith and Nephew, and they they sent a telegram back because I'm that old. We didn't have cell phones and email back then, so basically their way of getting hold of me quickly was to send a telegram and say, please come for interview. So I ended up working for this company, Smith and Nephew, who I found out was a medical device company. And yeah, I went there for the interview. They did a strong selling job about why I should come and work for them, and it seemed like fun. So I said sure. So ended up working for Smith and Nephew, which is a medical company, and it was basically in their corporate R&D center, working in there and having fun. After I'd been there about 6 months, my boss left and got promoted to another division. So suddenly I had his job running the lab, and continued to have fun, and sort of opportunities just seemed to happen. So I didn't actually, I've never really done any serious career planning and deciding, what do you need to do to move on? What are the steps you need? Basically, all that happens is I kept getting given opportunities, and Smith and Nephew got into orthopedics in 1987. They did an acquisition of three orthopedic companies, and suddenly we were in the orthopedics business. And they turned to me and said, "Can you set up and run the R&D program to support these businesses?" So suddenly I was into R&D and setting up had a blank canvas and setting up this huge R&D program to support these new businesses. So again, lots of good opportunities. So that got me into the world of orthopedics, tissue engineering, various things. But after a while, I decided that I'd quite like to get closer to the customer and closer to the operating divisions. So I talked to the person in the sports medicine division, and he said, come and run the R&D team. So in 2000, January the 2nd, 2000, I turned up in the USA and working in the sports medicine division at Smith and Nephew, and did that. So a little bit different from the sort of more R&D stuff. You're more into product development. So a different set of challenges, big team of people, but again, great fun.
Yeah. So back us up. So you said you came to this. Just so give us a little bit of your history then. So we detect an accent. So where are you from? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to university?
Okay, yes. So basically, I was born just south of London. It's now part of London, but back when I was born, it was a few miles south of London. But London's sort of grown out, so
Right,
it's now
right,
the southern
right.
parts of London. Um, I grew up there for the first 10 years of my life. I then moved about 100 miles north of London for my sort of 10 to 18 period. And then when I came to get to university, I came to London to go to university. I went to Queen Mary College in the East End of London, and that's where I ended up doing my degree, my PhD, meeting my wife. Um, so
So knowing a lot of my English friends and brothers, it never crossed your mind to become a footballer. I mean, you're tall enough, and
I am not a good sports person, so not at all sporting. So yeah,
so do
I
you?
watch it, but don't. I'm a lousy ball player.
So am I. I'm slow. I'm I don't have that Jamaican twitch gene that they have like Usain Bolt. I'm insanely slow.
Yeah.
So yeah. So do you have a favorite team then? A football team?
I support West Ham because I used to walk past their grounds on my way to college. So
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That gives you a reason to support a team. So sometimes they do well, usually they don't.
Yeah,
But
they're having a go at it right now. They're yeah,
uh,
a little bit yeah. All right, well, great. So let's get back on to where we were. So you start going into orthopedics. Of course, when I met you, you were at a orthopedics conference here
mhm.
in Denver, and you were presenting something. I don't know if you're really presenting or just um uh I know it's a conference, so I'm guessing
Yeah,
you're educating orthopedics, orthopedic
yeah.
surgeons and things like that on some of your developments, and it's quite fascinating. You shared with me that you have over 30 patents,
Oh,
or at least
it's
30
such a,
patents, somewhere like that.
it's more than that now. Actually,
Okay.
it's bizarre. I was actually looking at a thing on LinkedIn yesterday. Somebody was complaining about, old people can't get jobs and they're always turned down for jobs in whatever because of their age. And I just sort of looked at it, and I'd actually worked out that I set my own company up when I was 54, actually in 2010, so right in the middle of a recession. Um, but I then worked out that since I turned 60, I've had 39 US patents granted,
Wow.
which is, I don't know, I have less than 80, so it's more than half of my patents have been since I turned 60. So, to these people that say you can't, you shouldn't be employing people who are old because you won't get anything from them. I mean, the reverse is true. I think, it's, I've certainly accelerated my sort of eh, entrepreneurship and my inventorship since I got my grey hair.
So you started this company. What's the name of your company? Could you share that?
Sure. Yeah. The company that I was with when I met you in Denver is Tetrous, and we actually spun it out of another company. We had a company and we developed technology for making bone grafting materials, and we recognized that that same material could be used in sports medicine. So we spun out a separate company to develop the sports medicine. So the original company we sold. Which was good. Um, and then Tetrous, we developed our product, and we're actually doing something that's different to what most other companies are doing in sports medicine. What we're concentrating on is a thing called the enthesis, and the enthesis is where a tendon attaches to bone. And if you think about it from an engineering perspective, having something stretchy and trying to get it to attach to something that's rigid is a difficult thing to do. And in the body, when you're born, the entheses are formed, and they're a very, very clever bit of biology and a very clever structure that allows you to get a good attachment of the bone and a good transfer of the load between the tendon and the bone. When you injure that and it gets detached and you have to reattach it, that enthesis doesn't reform. You just get scar tissue, which is very weak. So the problem is once you have something like a rotator cuff tear or something like that, once you've had one, it's it's likely that you're going to have more problems.
So typically, and without this emphasis that we're learning about, what is the average failure rate? Pre Tetris, and I believe your product is EnFix.
Yeah,
What's the failure rate? Typically that we're talking about ongoing problems with the rotator cuff.
yeah, yeah. It's the rotator cuff is the most important area that you have about another 100 entheses in your body, and they can all give you issues and problems. But we're concentrating first on the rotator cuff, and there are about 500,000 rotator cuff surgeries every year in the USA. And if you look at the literature, they'll tell you that most people of sort of my age have problems with their shoulders and have rotator cuff tears. So even if they're not, it's like my wife. has got a very bad shoulder. She's not had surgery on it, but it's torn and it is partly disabling. But if you look at the success rates in surgeries or the failure rates in surgeries, they can be anything from 13% to 94%.
Wow.
Which is a scary number. Um, and there's lots of caveats in all of that. That not every surgeon has a 90% failure rate, and a lot. And sometimes when you talk about failure, it's a radiographic failure, but the patient says it's good enough, I'm fine. But by and large, the underlying thing is when you see numbers like that, what it tells you is there's a problem, and you know you'll you'll never find a surgeon who says, yeah, my failure rate is over 50%. But when we talk to surgeons, they're all interested to talk to us because they all know that what they're doing isn't good enough, and if they can do something to make things better, then they'll be very happy. And one of the, as an example, one of the surgeons that we're working with has a very complicated surgical technique he uses for very complex tears. And his failure rate is only 8%. So that's not bad.
No.
But he's now using our product and says, yeah, this is better. And he's also saying, actually, what I think I need to start thinking about is how can I get my patients to rehabilitate faster and get back to their normal activities faster, because I'm seeing a better healing with the EnFix. So it's not just about avoiding failures, it's also about getting the healing to be faster and better. And if you're reforming the enthesis, you're getting a better quality tissue, you're getting a better quality repair, which means you have the possibility of getting patients back to their normal activities faster. And rotator cuff, everybody knows somebody who's got a bad shoulder. And it isn't just about elite athletes and whatever. It's about people and wanting just to be able to do normal things like pick their kids up, stuff like that. I mean, it's a very disabling thing. So anything we can do to make it better is a good thing. And our technology seems to be doing that. Actually, the show I was at when we met was the American Orthopedic Sports Medicine Society. And it was their annual meeting, and we actually were awarded a prize for having the best technology. So I was on a high when I saw you.
Yes, you definitely were. So was that the AOSSM ACE award that you're speaking
Yes.
about? Yes, yes, that's awesome. So let me ask you a question then, Andy. With what you're doing, how did you and what made you decide to come up with this brilliant piece of engineering? And can you tell us how it works, how it's applied a little bit? Just,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I learned back in my sort of early days at Smith and Nephew was when you're developing a product, you can't just sort of throw it at the surgeon and say, yeah, you work out how to do it. You've got to help the surgeon to do their whole procedure. So it's about making life easy for the surgeon. So it's not just about having a magic material that will heal the enthesis, because if you've just got a magic material, that doesn't mean the surgeon can use it easily. And basically what led to this development was I looked in the literature. I've been doing a lot of work with demineralized bone matrix materials, and they are a very potent orthobiologic material that are used a lot in spine surgery. It's donated tissue. So there's a lot of people out there who, have their bodies donated to science after they die and whatever. This donated tissue is just as important as organs and the various other things that people probably know more about. But donated bone allows us to, we remove all the ceramic part of the bone, just leave the collagen and all the growth factors. And what you've got then is a material with all the body's natural signals in that tell the body to make bone. And so I recognize that for the materials we were developing for use in bone. But I also looked at the literature and found some papers where people had been looking at the material and showing that it could influence the repair of the enthesis. And various papers were doing various things, but nobody had something that was something that you could say, this could be a product. This is something that you could give to a surgeon and have them use. So the other part that we brought to it was to say, let's take this material and put it into a form that makes it easy for the surgeon to use. And basically, when I first went to talk to a surgeon about what we were doing, we had a sheet of material and I showed it to him and I said, this works really well. This will make the enthesis heal. And he just said, please, no, please don't give me another sheet of material to chase around in a joint. Because arthroscopic surgery is a really tough thing to do. You're going down little holes into a joint, you've got water in there, and things just float all over the place. So he just said, there's got to be a better way. So we looked at what we could think of and what we did, and we came up with an idea, which was to. So I haven't got all my props prepared, but
No, it's
so
fine. It's
excuse
fine.
me. So basically, we made the product like a little golf tee.
Okay, yeah, I can
So
see
it has
that.
a peg and a top portion. And then what we did was to get an instrument to put it on. So it sits on it. So then when you're a surgeon, you're going into the shoulder, you can just put it in, pop it into a hole.
Do they
It
drill
goes in.
first?
Yeah. They have a little, they just punch a hole.
Okay.
So it's just a very small hole, which is the same punch and the same type of hole that they have to put in place the suture anchors, which are used to tie down the repair anyway. So we're not changing the way they do their procedure. So basically, we came up with something that was a very easy way of them being able to control the implant, because the implant's on the end of this instrument, they're holding it, they can put it wherever they want. They don't have to chase it. It's not running away. They can go into the shoulder, put it where they want, tap, and it's in. So it's a very simple procedure. It adds less than a minute to their time in surgery.
Wow. So now when they put that in, then what is the next step? They attach the tendon to that?
Yeah, basically you're trying to pull the tendon back down onto the bone. And what we do is we put our implant at that point where you're trying to get the bone to reattach. So basically it's sitting where you want the healing to take place. And the 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 reason it works and the clever thing about it is essentially the demineralized bone fiber in the body remodels into new bone through a process called endochondral ossification. That process is the same process in the embryo that leads to the formation of the enthesis in the first place. So everybody else is trying to get the tendon to reattach to the bone, but what we've found is what you need to do is to make the bone reattach to the tendon, and by doing it, yeah, look at how something was built in the first place. If you want to fix it in the body, in the embryo, bone forms the enthesis. It goes from the bone through to the enthesis. Doesn't go the other way. So if you're trying to heal something, learn from how it was made.
Now that you have this, and it seems to me from what I saw on the site, so it forms and it bounds again. What kind of success rate. Well, first of all, how many procedures have been done using
Right.
your about how
Yeah.
many using your technology, and how long has that been going on? How
Sure.
since?
Yeah. Yeah. We started out just about 18 months ago. And we started out with a small group of surgeons, just so that we could gain understanding of how the procedure works, how the instruments worked, and all those sorts of things. So we started out with a group of 7 surgeons, and they did about 300 procedures in the first year. We're now expanding out, and we've got probably at least double that number of surgeons now using the product. Um, we haven't done a formal clinical study, and that's partly because we're a startup that doesn't have an awful lot of money. And what we're doing is the surgeons are using the product, and they're basically getting feedback, either anecdotal and some qualitative and quantitative data. So, we are seeing that the surgeons are, for example, one of the surgeons said to me, I'm not sending as many patients for MRIs as I used to. And then he went and looked back at his failure rates over the last sort of the over a year before he started using our product, and then the year using it. And she said, my failure rates are 30% lower.
Wow, wow.
So that, he's using this on every case he's doing. So again, the other thing, when you want to do a clinical study, you end up with a very small percentage of the population. You say, oh, it's only got to be this size tear, this, that, and what. You basically have a very narrow window of patients you operate on. Our surgeons have been using this on everybody. So everybody from, fairly small, easy, rotator cuffs through to the real train wrecks where they're going in and they're thinking, what am I going to do to this shoulder? How do I stop this patient needing to have a joint replacement? So it's being used on all comers, and basically when the surgeons are getting their MRIs, they're looking at them and they're seeing very good healing and good quality tendons. So we're now just getting to the stage where the surgeons are starting to write that up, and we'll start getting some publications to sort of justify all of that. But basically, the surgeons are extremely happy with what they're seeing, and they're continuing to use the product.
Are they seeing an increase or a shortened recovery period as well, or does that vary case by case? I imagine it
That,
varies case by case, but overall on an
yeah,
average, what are they seeing?
that's a really tough area, because when you look at how does a patient rehabilitate from a surgery, well, obviously it varies from on how complex the surgery was, and whatever. And surgeons have their protocols that they go through and the things that they tell their surgeons to do. And basically the advice I give anyone who I talk to who's having a surgery is, treat the rehabilitation like a religion. Treat it like you've got religion. You just do it, do it, do it.
Yes.
Um, but interestingly, talking to one of the surgeons a couple of weeks ago, and he's saying, I'm looking at my patients. I'm going to talk to my physiotherapists about how can I improve the rate of rehab. I want to change the rehab protocol to get my patients going faster, because when I see them, they are they seem to be better to me. So I should be able to get them going. But it's not a simple thing. You can't just say, let's do it. And years ago, I had a project where we thought we were going to be able to accelerate the healing of ACL surgeries, and we got totally hung up in how can we prove that we can rehab people faster with this treatment? Are we going to do a trial where the people that don't have our product are going to fail their rehab? You can't do that. You can't have people in the control group failing because you're going through a faster rehab protocol that maybe your treated patients it'll work well for. So how you prove these things is a tough thing to do, and it's not something that happens quickly. But universally, in the surgeons that we've talked to, they see the promise in this technology that if I'm going to get if the healing is looking as though it's faster, when I look at a 3-month MRI, it looks like a 6-month MRI. When I look at a 6-month MRI, it looks like a 12-month MRI. So my patients are healing faster. The quality of the tendon is faster. I should be able to get these patients rehabilitating faster. But that's not going to happen overnight, and it's going to be a slow thing. But the good thing is our surgeons recognize that, and they recognize in their patients the improvements that say they should be able to do that.
So now, do you foresee this being used, the same technology in other areas, beyond the rotator
Yeah.
cuff?
Yeah, it is. And it's actually the first case that was not in the rotator cuff. We didn't know anything about till the surgeon called us up and just said, I've just done a hip repair.
Is it?
The gluteus medius in the hip. And he just said, I used the EnFix for it. And I said, whoa, what? And he said, well, it's just like a rotator cuff in terms of the repair that you do. However, it's worse than the rotator cuff because if I get to the end of the road with the rotator cuff, I've got a reverse shoulder arthroplasty I can put into my patients. For the hip, there isn't really a solution, so I need this to work. And we've had since then, there's been another surgeon who's done a hip case. We've got a surgeon who's done an Achilles tendon. We got surgeons wanting to do the proximal hamstring, which is another area where you get hamstring tears, which can be very debilitating, not just for athletes who have the problem. So what we say is it's all about the enthesis, and we don't say it's all about the rotator cuff. So as I said at the beginning, you've got about 100 or so entheses in your body, and if they start giving you problems, then you need to do something about them. And our technology has that potential to do that. And we're just starting, a year into, from concentrating on the rotator cuff, we're starting to see the surgeons recognizing that also and saying, I want to do this I want to treat this patient and this patient. And the thing with surgeons is when you go to a surgeon, they have to have the answer for what they're going to do to you. And what they really hate is when they don't have an answer.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's the biggest problem in the world. So, for example, cartilage defects, which is another area I've worked in over the years. There are cartilage defects, and surgeons have got nothing they can or had nothing they could do for them. When a surgeon came out for a treatment for these cartilage defects a number of years ago, the academy meeting, the room was packed to bursting point. Everybody was in there trying to hear about it. It was only about 20,000 patients a year in the US. But for every surgeon, if they had one of those patients a year and they had nothing they could do, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So sometimes, the things you do are things that are a real need for the surgeon, but from a commercial perspective are not huge. What we're doing, the rotator cuff is a huge opportunity. There's 500,000 procedures. But I think that we'll find as we move on, there will be other entheses that we treat that may only be 20,000 a year or 50,000 a year, not 500,000. But for those 50,000 people and for their surgeons, it's a big deal.
Yes, and we're just talking in the US alone. I know you traveled
Yes.
internationally quite a bit. So I would imagine that you're presenting, the same technologies to orthopedic
Yeah.
surgeons in your travels and around the world. Where else are your focus outside of the United States?
Right. We have a very strong tie-up in Australia, and that's a historical thing through one. I've done a lot of work with a guy in Australia I've collaborated with over 25 years, and through him and the people he knew in Australia, uh, Australian company got involved with our technology from TheraCell and started using that, and they did extremely well with it. And so when we then said we're doing this sports medicine thing, they just said, "Yep, we're in." Um, so we actually, when we launched the product, we did our first surgeries in Chicago on July 30th of June 30th rather of 2023. We then jumped on a plane, and I spent my 4th of July last year in the OR with Australian surgeons doing their first EnFix cases.
Oh,
So
wow.
we have a good established group of surgeons in Australia. We've got surgeons wanting to use the product in New Zealand, but yeah, we're concentrating on just the Australia and the USA just to get ourselves established, get the technology established, show that surgeons can use it and like to use it.
Now, are you getting any resistance at all from any government authorities or anything like that? Or I'm imagining some of this material has already been in use or somewhat familiar
Yeah,
because you're talking about
yeah.
so I guess you were able to somehow or not really have to worry too much about the FDA.
Well,
If you are to
the,
expound on that a little bit, I
yeah,
know they're in everybody's business, so I'm not saying they're
yeah,
not out there, but you're using
yeah,
technology that or
yeah,
materials that are already in existence, so you're not developing
yeah,
a new drug or anything like that.
yeah, yeah. We in Australia, our product is regulated by the Australian equivalent of the FDA, and we have approval, and the product is used on that basis. In the USA, donated tissue products they're regulated by the FDA, but they're regulated in a different way to medical devices and drugs. And essentially, what the regulations say is that if it's a minimally manipulated tissue product, then you don't have to get FDA approval or clearance before you can sell the product. You have to make it in an FDA registered tissue bank, and you have to follow all of the requirements and rules for tissue banks. So we have a tissue bank that we work with, and they make the product according to following all the rules and all the testing and everything. But the product doesn't formally need FDA clearance before you can use it. So it's the regulations for drugs, medical devices, and things in the US are extremely complicated, and it can the differences can be vast in what you need to do before you can sell a product, and sometimes that only relates to what you can say about the product,
Yeah,
not anything to do with its safety or its efficacy. It's what you want to say that it can do. So we have a product that's a minimally manipulated tissue product. It's a bone graft. Essentially we are grafting the bone to make it heal to the tendon, and that is the same use for these demineralized bone matrix materials that are used in hundreds of thousands of cases every year. Particularly, the biggest usage is in spine surgery.
okay,
And so, if people have their spines fused and spinal fusion surgery, then these demineralized bone matrix materials are very commonly used, and that's the area where they're most often used.
excellent, excellent. So Where do you see you guys going from here? This is really fascinating, and I know you're on a high from this summer's events and the
Yep.
award. Uh, yeah, just tell us, and then also give
Mm.
us a little bit of information as to where viewers might be able to learn more about this, and
Sure.
you're
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we're having a blast. About a month ago, we were in Australia at the Australians Big Shoulder meeting, and we were launching the product there, and got a lot of interest. Um, the product that we've got out now can be used to treat a lot of different entheses, as we're beginning to see, like, not just the rotator cuff, but there are some areas where the shape and geometry of the implant isn't right. So one of the things that I'm spending a lot of my time thinking about is for repairing things like the ACL, to anterior cruciate ligament. Uh, it's another big area where the the success rate of the surgeries is not as high as people want, and the speed of rehabilitation isn't as fast as people want. So we think that there's another opportunity there to develop a product that will help the healing in ACL surgeries. So that's my big thing at the moment, trying to get that one through there. In terms of trying to learn more about what we're doing, we try to have a good amount of education material on our website. Our website is www.tetrous.com. Not Tetris the game, but so so if you go there, you can see things, and if you've got questions, just there's a contact us form, so we can help answer people's questions, and if they need to find a surgeon, we can help put them in touch with a surgeon.
This is absolutely enlightening and fascinating. Yeah, I thank you so much for your time. And I know I'm absolutely confident, that our viewers will find this absolutely useful. Thank you so very much. Anything else that you might want to share before we let you go there, Andy?
We do have a cosmetics company, though. The cosmetics company, just as a teaser, is called Element 8.
Well, we'll have to catch up and do an episode on Element 8.
Okay, James, that's great. Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Well, I hope you found this episode both enjoyable and informative. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to join us on our next workload adventure.